The 60s! What a time to be alive! Not like I was alive back then. I mean, that'd be ridiculous, right? But for horror cinema, the 1960s were a time filled with a frantic creative energy where seemingly everyone with an eye for cinema wanted to try their hands at mashing up frames in the most terrifying way possible. And mash them up they did, because surprisingly, perhaps more so than any other decade in horror, the 60s has maintained itself as the benchmark of some of the greatest works in horror cinema. The term classic is bandied around more often than not, but the classics of the 1960s are in a whole horror league of their own. Hello horror fans, what's going on, and once again welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest horror movies from the 60s. Roll the clip.
Say I love you.
For the curious amongst you, that clip was from the terrifying 1962 psychological cautionary tale Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, starring Bette Davis and Joan Crawford in one of the most horrifying breakdowns of sibling rivalry caught on screen. And of course, it leads us to an important point, because the 1960s have many more than just 5 classic horrors, so consider that clip an honourable mention alongside Rosemary's Baby, Village of the Damned, The Pit and the Pendulum, Peeping Tom, Night of the Living Dead, Black Sunday. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Kicking off at number 5, The Innocents, 1961. And perhaps the most traditional attempt at 1960s horror, particularly in its pastiche approach to the literary greats of gothic fiction. In many ways, the 1960s were the first commercial attempt at making horror cinema marketable, and so it relied on some of the more terrifying yet household names of literature in an effort to make it palatable to a mass audience. So then came 1961's The Innocents, based on the legendary gothic horror novel The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, although the pages of this particular ghost story are far more frightful on the silver screen. Also, as a little pleasant side note, The Turn of the Screw would also later go on to inspire 2001's The Others, which is a great horror film, so there you go. Directed by the legendary Jack Clayton with a screenplay from the equally legendary Truman Capote, The Innocents tells the tale of Miss Giddens, a kind young governess played by Deborah Kerr, who takes up her first job caring for the niece and nephew of a wealthy businessman at his large country estate. To begin with, her role as the caretaker of the children starts off innocent enough, and she quickly becomes enthralled with her newfound occupation, but of course that's before she starts hearing disembodied floating voices and seeing strange faces behind windows. The Innocents is dripping with atmosphere, and its sound design is second to none, relying on a creepy cacophony of whispering voices to move us deeper into the film's paranormal descent. And the thing is, it's so well done that it still stands the test of time. In many ways, you can't beat watching a character that you care for slowly creep through the dangers of a dark corridor with a candle clutched in their hand, holding your breath as to what's lurking behind the corner. The Innocents is Horror 101. There's not much more to it, really. Coming in at number 4, Kill Baby Kill, 1966. When it comes to Italian giallo horror, Dario Argento is undisputably the master of the thrill, but he owes the true inspiration of his craft to this film in particular, Kill Baby Kill, an otherwise unknown paranormal slasher thriller that would have taken its rightful spot in 1960s horror legend if it wasn't for its otherwise lackluster title. Also, in Italy it was released under the title Operation Fear, which is far more marketable than Kill Baby Kill, but yeah, whatever. Written and directed by the legendary Mario Bava, the film focuses on a small European village in the early 1900s that is seemingly being terrorized by the ghost of a murderous young girl that has a habit of bouncing a red ball in a particularly terrifying manner. It's a simple premise, but narratively it works to a frightening efficiency. And if a ghostly little girl in a white dress peering through windows in the dead of night, psychically forcing people to impale themselves on candelabras doesn't sound like it'll scare you, I've got bad news, because it will. Perhaps more than any other giallo horror, Kill Baby Kill is truly timeless, thanks to Mario Bava's brilliantly unique eye for terrifying an audience. I know it kind of sounds a little on the nose to add, but the camera work is absolutely insane in this film, and what Bava chooses to let us see and also not see adds so much to the horror experience. Also, it's shot in Technicolor, and the strange familiarity of a non-black and white movie does so much to add to the tension, as well as exacerbate, you know, all of the blood and gore, because for a horror film from the 60s, there's a hell of a lot of it. Next up at number 3, The Haunting, 1963. Now, I'm just going to preface this point with a few statements. Shirley Jackson is awesome. This film in particular is awesome. Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House is awesome, and the 1999 remake of this film is hot trash. Sorry, I just had to get it out. Although Owen Wilson getting decapitated by a swinging iron wolf's head is pretty damn hilarious. But the point is, whichever cinematic depiction of Shirley Jackson's novel you'd like to take, 1963's The Haunting is an incredible horror film in its own right. And like all of our entries on this list, it stands the test of time. Strangely enough though, it was directed by this guy, Robert Wise, the man responsible for West Side Story and The Sound of Music. But I guess in this case, the hills were alive with the sound of horror cinema. The Haunting tells a tale of the old and mysterious Hill House, a century-old manor that has been the witness to countless terrifying deeds and tragic misfortune throughout its long history. But of course, this is a horror film, and the curious Dr. John Markway, played by Richard Johnson, employs the paranormal talents of a psychic woman named Theodora alongside her eventual love interest Eleanor Lace and the heir to the property Luke Sanderson. Of course, what plays out is the traditional descent into paranormal madness, alongside everything that you'd expect from Shirley Jackson's hallmark haunted house of legend. But eventually, what sets this film apart is that The Haunting quickly makes a departure from just the paranormal and instead employs a very human portrayal of the horrors that lurk within the human mind. After all, it's a classic for a reason. Swinging in at number 2, KURONEKO, 1968.
侍を殺し、その生き血をすることが私たちの悲願です。そのために天地の魔人に願をかけたのです。あれが
Because thankfully for us, although Western horror cinema was definitely in full swing throughout the 1960s, it was also making waves and twisting cautionary tales of folklore in the most horrifying way possible on the other side of the planet, in Japan, with 1968's KURONEKO, perhaps one of the most strangely beautiful and equally terrifying horror films of the decade. Now also, it's probably important to note that this film won't be for everybody, but as far as setting a precedent for horror cinema goes, KURONEKO, otherwise known as A Black Cat in a Bamboo Grove, did it like no other. Written and directed by Kenito Shindo, the film itself is based upon the classic Japanese short story Yabu no Naka, or In a Grove, a stark account of the murder of several samurai in a bamboo forest near Kyoto. The film itself takes a few liberties with the traditional tale, but for the most part it exemplifies its themes. Set during the ancient Civil War period of feudal Japan, the spirit of a woman alongside her daughter-in-law seek revenge after being brutally murdered in a bamboo grove by a group of samurai, and in their afterlife, their sole purpose becomes to enact the very same violence and torture that was shown to them. This film pulls no punches, and given the fact that it was made in the 1960s, it really raised the bar to show just how far horror cinema could go. For any fan of the genre, KURONEKO needs to be seen, and it serves to clarify a deep understanding of Japanese horror cinema in modern times. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Psycho, 1960. Because the fact of the matter remains, this list cannot be complete without giving credit to perhaps one of the greatest horror movies ever made, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, a film that barely found its way into the decade and yet managed to set the benchmark on every other horror film that has ever followed it. Psycho is a masterclass in cinema, you don't need me to tell you that, and even that scene in particular has been analysed and recreated time and time again, leaving every filmmaker afterwards scratching their heads and thinking, how can I make a scene as good as the legendary shower scene of Psycho? I mean, it's also probably important to note that we could have filled an entire list with the works of Alfred Hitchcock, because he remains to be an immortal titan of horror cinema, and few filmmakers will ever come close to the impact and influence that he had on the genre as a whole. Psycho is horror perfection, from the off-kilter mood and tone set about by its long drawn-out establishing scenes as we gradually make our way to Bates Motel after making us feel strangely comfortable with the motivations of Marion Crane on her trip across the country. Hitchcock knew exactly what he was doing with this film. He knew that the intention was to enthrall us in the perverse chance encounter of a killer and his victim, yet the expertise in his craft is the fact that we can't stop watching. No other filmmaker would have ever killed off his lead actress halfway through the film, and because of that, Janet Leigh's legendary shower scene deservedly became the most iconic sequence in horror cinema, if not the whole of cinema. 45 seconds of on-screen violence and brutality, 52 editing cuts that jar the audience with each stab of the kitchen knife. Psycho is the best film of the 1960s, period, and probably one of the best horror films ever made. That's all there is to it. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 scariest horror movies from the 60s. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you have any choice picks of your own? Or do you even have your own top 5 scary list that you'd like to add to the pile? Then please speak your mind freely in the comment section below. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. First up, King Ghidorah says, watched until you said, for the curious amongst you, for the 1000th time, then shut it off. Don't you think if someone is coming here for horror movies, it's safe to say everyone knows the movie you have shown? Well, King Ghidorah, for the curious amongst you as to why I say for the curious amongst you so often, it's because quite a while ago we were contacted by a top 5 scary fan who is visually impaired and who kindly asked for me to describe which clip I chose for the opening sequence, and I'm a man of my word, so there you go. Now you know. We're all horror fans, dude. Chill. On that note, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Cheers for sticking around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video, or just top 5 scary videos in particular, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos. Until next time, you take it easy.